Example 4 I have on here simply to kind of get you used to different syntaxes, okay? Because we use that little superscript of -1 sometimes to be as a reciprocal, and sometimes we use it to represent inverse. And when we're dealing with trigonometric functions and their inverses, we have to be clear on that, because the reciprocal of a trig function and the inverse of a trig function are two different things. For regular numbers, it isn't. You know, a reciprocal and an inverse number are practically the same thing. You know, depending on what kind of inverse you're talking about. So when I look at part A, it says, okay, I want to do the arc sine of 0.25. I'm just going to do the arc sine of 0.25, which is the same thing as a quarter, and 1/4 is not a ratio that shows up when I do one of my special angles and take the sine of it. So I get it by 0.2528. When I do the sine of x to the -1, x to the -1, or 0.25 to the -1, means take a reciprocal of that. So take a reciprocal of 0.25, I get 4. The sine of 4, and if we're not told out in a degree measure, we're assuming it's radians, is going to be -0.7568. So two totally different answers. A and B are two things that some students get confused with each other. They think they're the same thing. They're not. Or even worse, C, the sine of x raised to the -1 power, which means I would take the sine of x and then reciprocate it. This thing is basically cosecant. I'm doing the cosecant of x here. That's how you would put cosecant in if you don't have a cosecant key. Some newer calculators do have it. You have to go through some menus to get to it, but it'll let you do it. Whereas if you want to do a cosecant on some older calculators, you would have to figure out the sine of x and then do its reciprocal, and you can do that in one entry by typing it in this way. And of course, D just goes completely mad with a bunch of -1s. So you always start with the innermost function first. So I'm doing the arc sine, or I'm doing the inverse, or the reciprocal of the arc sine of x raised to the -1 power. So if I put that 0.25 in raised to the -1 power, I don't know why I wrote that twice. I do the arc sine. I'm doing the arc sine of 4 inside there. Well, when I do the arc sine of 4, I'm looking for an angle that has a sine value of 4. Well, if you remember anything about the sine function itself, the sine function always fluctuates between -1 and 1. If you remember, it's a ratio, the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. That can only possibly be 1 at the greatest. Usually the leg of a right triangle is certainly smaller than the hypotenuse. When they're equal, it's usually because you have a 90-degree angle at that point, or a 0-degree angle, whichever the case may be. So that's why you get the -1 and 1s from, and things of that nature. But you're not going to get a value of 4 when you take the sine of an angle. So this is completely undefined. You can't make this happen. So, you know, A, B, and C are, as I said, are the ones you want to focus your attention on, because they're the ones that sometimes students will write one in place of the other. You know, they'll write arc sine as B or C, and that's not what it is. Or they'll try to do cosecant by doing an arc sine. It's not the same thing. So be careful about that.